Maya Williams stood at the front of the courtroom, her hands clasped together in front of her. The cool air from the vents seemed to make the room feel even more impersonal, and she could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on her. It was only her second time ever in a courtroom, and she hated how it felt. She had never been in trouble with the law before, but this zoning violation, something small and procedural, had turned into a nightmare. The courtroom buzzed with low whispers, the sound of paper shuffling, and the occasional cough of someone trying to avoid the cold air in the room. Judge Thomas Jenkins, sitting high up on his platform, gave a stern glance at the docket in front of him. With his gray suit, white shirt, and a tie that looked as if it hadn't seen a good wash in years, he gave off an air of authority and confidence that made even the most seasoned lawyers uneasy. He was known for running a tight ship in the courtroom. There were no exceptions to the rules, and no leniency for those who didn't measure up to the system. Maya had heard stories about how he could deliver harsh sentences, often with little room for negotiation. Her case, however, seemed like it should have been simple, nothing more than a formality. Maya had recently launched a tech startup that aimed to bring transparency to local government spending, a platform called ClearPath that helped citizens track how their tax dollars were being used. Unfortunately, one of the steps in the zoning process for her new office had been missed, a technicality that could have easily been overlooked. She wasn't the first to make such an error, and she certainly wouldn't be the last. When her name was called, Maya walked confidently up to the stand. She had rehearsed what she would say. She would apologize for the oversight, explain how it would be corrected, and hope for a reasonable fine. But as she stood in front of Judge Jenkins, she felt something shift in the air. He wasn't looking at her as an entrepreneur trying to make a positive difference. He was looking at her as another business owner who had broken the law. Judge Jenkins didn't look up as he spoke, his voice steady and firm. The violation is clear. You've neglected to complete the necessary paperwork. It's a simple mistake, but rules are rules. I'm imposing a fine of $500. He paused for a moment, then added, and I trust you'll have this resolved quickly. Maya nodded, trying to hide the disappointment on her face. She wasn't surprised, but the sting of the fine was sharper than she expected. She thanked the judge and walked out, feeling the cold air in the hallway hit her like a wave. What she didn't know was that this fine, this small, seemingly insignificant moment, was about to turn into something much bigger. Maya Williams had always been drawn to technology, but it wasn't the gadgets or the software itself that excited her. It was the power that technology held to change systems that had long been built to favor a few and silence many. As a young girl, Maya watched her mother struggle to make ends meet while dealing with a lack of transparency in local government programs. Whether it was outdated public information, inaccessible financial records, or confusion over how resources were allocated, Maya saw firsthand how important it was for people to understand where their tax dollars were going. When she got older, her natural aptitude for coding pushed her toward computer science, and she soon began working at a startup focused on data analytics. But it wasn't until she saw the stark discrepancies in public sector transparency that Maya decided to shift her focus entirely. She envisioned a platform that would empower citizens to track government spending in real time, helping them understand how their taxes were being used or misused, and hold local and federal governments accountable for their actions. With ClearPath, her brainchild, Maya set out to do just that. It wasn't just another tech startup, it was a movement. Using her expertise in software development, she began building a user-friendly interface that could break down complicated government financial reports into easily digestible real-time data. The platform allowed citizens to view how tax money was being allocated, what projects were funded, and how efficiently resources were being spent. For the first time, people could access government data without having to navigate through mountains of paperwork or convoluted websites. Maya had always been driven by the belief that knowledge was power. She knew that if people could see exactly where their money was going, they would demand change. She also understood that in order for her platform to succeed, it couldn't just be a tool for data, it had to build trust. trust in government, trust in the system, and trust in the people who were pushing for reform. She started small, launching ClearPath in a few local communities and working with a handful of state agencies to test the platform. The response was immediate and positive. Local residents appreciated having access to government spending data, and some public officials even started using the platform themselves to showcase their commitment to transparency. But Maya wasn't content with just local success. Her dream was much bigger: to create a system that would eventually be adopted by the federal government, forcing entire agencies to operate with a level of transparency that had never been seen before. However, despite the promising results, running a tech startup wasn't without its challenges. Securing funding was difficult, especially as a Black woman in a predominantly white, male-dominated industry. And while Maya's platform was gaining recognition, many didn't see her as the driving force behind a nationwide change. Until the day she walked into Judge Jenkins' courtroom. Maya's world wasn't just about coding and innovation. It was about survival. Balancing the demands of a growing business with the financial strain that came with it was a constant challenge. The $500 fine wasn't going to make or break her, but it felt like another weight on an already heavy load. ClearPath was still in its early stages, and though she had garnered some interest from small local governments, getting federal contracts was still a distant dream. Every day, Maya pushed forward, working late into the night, refining the platform, preparing presentations, and building relationships with potential investors. But there was always the nagging feeling that it wasn't enough. While the public was beginning to notice her work, the pace was slower than she had hoped. Her startup needed funding to scale, and without the right resources, it seemed impossible to get the attention of the big players in government. She had applied to countless grants, pitched her vision to venture capitalists, and networked at every tech event she could attend. But the lack of immediate returns felt discouraging. It wasn't just the money, it was the perception. Maya was often underestimated, not just because of her age, but because of her race and gender. In the male-dominated tech world, the idea of a young Black woman building a platform to challenge governmental norms seemed far-fetched to some. There were moments when she felt the weight of that doubt, moments when she thought about giving up. But she couldn't. She had seen firsthand how the lack of transparency in government decisions could impact communities like hers. She had a responsibility to keep going, even if the odds were stacked against her. The fine had been a bitter reminder of how little people understood her mission. It wasn't just a zoning issue, it was a systemic problem. Here she was, trying to create a tool that could bring government closer to the people, and yet she was treated as if she was just another small business owner breaking the rules. It felt like the very system she was trying to expose was working against her. Every rejection, every financial hurdle, every small setback was a reminder of the uphill battle ahead. Yet, in the midst of it all, Maya found moments of clarity. She saw the difference ClearPath was making in the communities that had adopted it, even if it was small. She heard stories of people who had used the platform to challenge their local governments, demanding better use of their tax dollars. These stories kept her going, despite the frustrations. She wasn't just building a business, she was laying the foundation for a movement. And no fine, no setback, no disbeliever was going to stop her from seeing it through. But it wasn't until a chance conversation reached Judge Jenkins that Maya's journey would take an unexpected turn. It was a few weeks after the court session that Judge Jenkins first heard Maya's name again. He was having a casual lunch with a colleague, Aaron, a government attorney who had been involved in tech policy discussions. Aaron had mentioned ClearPath in passing, and the words struck Judge Jenkins with more impact than he expected. Maya Williams, the young tech entrepreneur. She's doing something big with government transparency, Aaron said between bites. Her platform, ClearPath, is helping local governments track spending and improve accountability. It's becoming more than just a tech project. It could change how we think about public funds. Judge Jenkins raised an eyebrow. His curiosity piqued. It was a rare occurrence for a tech startup to get the kind of attention Aaron was describing, especially when it came to public service. He had heard murmurs about ClearPath before but hadn't given it much thought. After all, it wasn't exactly the kind of work that would land a case in his courtroom. Until now. He found himself thinking about Maya and the fine he had imposed on her. A small, insignificant issue in the grand scheme of things. Yet here she was, at the center of a movement that could disrupt decades of established governmental systems. ClearPath wasn't just another piece of software. It was an ambitious tool to bring transparency to a sector that had often operated in the shadows. This wasn't some frivolous tech trend. It was a serious effort to change how people interacted with their government. With a growing sense of responsibility, Judge Jenkins decided to learn more. Over the next few days, he found himself researching ClearPath online. He read about the platform's goals and how it was already being used in several states to give citizens easier access to government spending data. The more he read, the more intrigued he became. Maya's vision was radical, but it was grounded in something that resonated with his own sense of fairness: accountability. Public institutions, he realized, had long avoided transparency, making it difficult for average citizens to know where their tax dollars were going or how their government was functioning. Maya's platform could change all that. Suddenly, the fine he'd imposed felt like a mistake. Here was a woman whose work could lead to long-term changes in the government, and yet he had treated her as just another business owner in violation of a zoning ordinance. The realization hit him hard. Maya's work wasn't a small blip on the radar. It had the potential to reshape the entire landscape of government transparency. He now understood that, and that understanding would push him to take an unexpected step. He couldn't ignore the significance of her work any longer, nor could he forget the fact that he had just handed down a fine to someone who might be shaping the future of government accountability. Judge Jenkins couldn't shake the thought of Maya Williams and ClearPath. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he had been quick to dismiss her. A small zoning violation, a fine, and he had treated it like any other routine case. He knew better now. The potential impact of Maya's work was far greater than anything he could have imagined that day in court. Driven by a sense of responsibility and curiosity, Judge Jenkins decided to reach out to her. His first step was to find her contact information. Surprisingly easy, given her growing presence in the local tech scene. He drafted an email, unsure of how it would be received, and hit send. Maya, I hope this message finds you well. I am Judge Thomas Jenkins, the presiding judge over your recent zoning violation case. I wanted to personally reach out to express my apologies for my initial decision in your case. After learning more about the work you're doing with ClearPath, I have a deeper appreciation for the impact your platform can have on our community and beyond. I would be honored if you would allow me the opportunity to meet and discuss your work further. Please let me know if this is something you would be open to. Regards, Thomas Jenkins. To his surprise, Maya replied almost immediately, agreeing to meet. The two set a date for a casual conversation at a local cafe, a neutral setting where they could talk without the constraints of a courtroom or formalities. When Maya walked into the cafe, she was taken aback. She had expected a formal, perhaps even stiff meeting with the judge, but instead, she was greeted with a warm smile and a sincere handshake. Judge Jenkins looked nothing like the imposing figure she had seen in court. He seemed genuine, and there was a hint of nervousness in his posture, something she hadn't expected from someone in his position. Over coffee, they dove straight into conversation. Maya shared her vision for ClearPath, explaining how it wasn't just a platform for tracking government spending, but a tool to bring people closer to their governments. She talked about the hurdles she faced, the skepticism from investors, the challenges of convincing local governments to adopt her platform, and the hurdles she still faced as a Black woman in the tech world. Judge Jenkins listened intently, absorbing every word. He was impressed not only by her expertise, but by her passion and determination. He had underestimated her before, seeing her only as a business owner with a minor infraction. But now, he saw someone who was changing the way people interacted with their government. "I'm sorry for not seeing this sooner," Jenkins said, his voice sincere. Your work is incredibly important, and I'm ashamed I didn't recognize that from the start. I would like to help however I can." Maya smiled, surprised by the judge's change of heart. She hadn't expected an apology, let alone an offer of support. It was a moment that would change the course of both their lives. The conversation with Judge Jenkins had been a turning point, and Maya could hardly believe the shift that had occurred. What had started as a tense, almost transactional interaction in the courtroom had evolved into something far more profound. Judge Jenkins was no longer just a figure of authority. He had become an ally, someone who truly understood the significance of ClearPath and the potential it had to create real change. Over the next few weeks, their relationship began to deepen. Judge Jenkins, who had spent most of his career in the judiciary, was now eager to help Maya navigate the bureaucratic maze that often thwarted innovators like her. His connections within local and federal government agencies gave her an edge, but it was his genuine belief in her mission that made all the difference. He wasn't just offering advice. He was actively looking for ways to amplify her voice. One afternoon, he called Maya with some exciting news. "I've been speaking with some colleagues in city government," he said, his tone upbeat. "They're interested in testing ClearPath in a few departments. I think we can get a pilot program off the ground within the next couple of months." Maya's heart raced. This was the kind of opportunity she had been working toward for years. Her platform would now have a chance to prove itself on a larger scale. She thanked Judge Jenkins, knowing that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. But it didn't stop there. Judge Jenkins' support was far more than just a simple endorsement. He began speaking publicly about ClearPath at various events, bringing attention to the need for transparency in government spending. His position in the judicial system gave him a unique platform to advocate for policies that could drive meaningful change, and he didn't hesitate to use it. At a conference on civic technology, Judge Jenkins stood before a packed room, sharing his newfound respect for Maya's work. "Government transparency shouldn't be a luxury," he said passionately. "It's a right. And ClearPath is an innovative solution that could revolutionize how we engage with our public institutions." The room buzzed with interest after his speech, and suddenly, more government officials were reaching out. Local agencies wanted to explore ClearPath for their own departments, and some of the larger state-level offices began taking notice. Maya couldn't believe the momentum that was building. It was as if a door had been opened, and now people were knocking to get in. What had started as a courtroom encounter, one that could have remained a simple, forgettable interaction, had now blossomed into a full-fledged collaboration. Judge Jenkins wasn't just helping ClearPath succeed. He was actively changing the narrative about government transparency and encouraging a movement that Maya had once thought impossible. As the weeks passed, Maya found herself moving closer to her dream of a nationwide platform, with Judge Jenkins standing by her side every step of the way. What began as a chance meeting was now a partnership that had the potential to shape the future of public accountability forever. As ClearPath continued to grow, the ripple effects of Judge Jenkins' support were felt far beyond the local community. Maya's platform, once a fledgling startup with a handful of users, began to gain significant traction. The pilot programs in various city departments had proven successful, with government officials using the platform to track expenditures and engage with citizens about how tax dollars were being allocated. The transparency that ClearPath brought was revolutionizing the way citizens interacted with their local governments, creating a new model for accountability and public trust. Maya was often interviewed by local media outlets who were eager to cover the success of the pilot programs. Each story about ClearPath brought in more users, more governments interested in adopting the platform, and more investors willing to provide funding. Maya's inbox was flooded with inquiries from large corporations, venture capital firms, and even national news outlets. But it was the change in perception that excited her most. No longer was she seen just as a small business owner with a niche product. ClearPath was being viewed as an essential tool for civic engagement, and Maya had become a recognized thought leader in the movement toward government transparency. Her once struggling startup was now on the brink of becoming a nationwide platform, with the potential to reach every corner of the country. Judge Jenkins, too, felt the shift. As more and more people started to learn about ClearPath and its impact, his decision to support Maya's platform became a defining moment in his career. He had been the one to find Maya in court, but now he was the one publicly championing her mission. It wasn't just about technology or innovation. It was about doing the right thing, about making a real, tangible difference in the lives of citizens who were hungry for accountability. The judge's words at the Civic Technology Conference had sparked interest among government leaders, and now conversations about ClearPath were taking place in high-level meetings and policy discussions. The platform's success caught the attention of federal agencies, who reached out to Maya to explore the possibility of a nationwide rollout. This was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. ClearPath was no longer just a local tool. It was becoming a key player in the push for transparency at the federal level. Maya couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The fine she had received in the courtroom, a small setback at the time, had set off a chain of events that led her to where she was now. It was almost poetic. The legal challenge had been the catalyst for everything that followed, and Judge Jenkins' role in her success had transformed from adversary to ally. The two of them had unwittingly become part of a much larger story, one that was far bigger than either of them could have imagined. With the support of Judge Jenkins and the growing momentum of ClearPath, Maya knew that the future was full of possibilities. The ripple effect was only just beginning. Months passed, and ClearPath continued to expand at an unprecedented rate. Maya's vision of a transparent and accountable government was no longer a distant dream. It was becoming a reality. Thanks to the collaborations with local, state, and now federal agencies, ClearPath was positioned to become the standard for public transparency. The platform's integration into government systems was transforming how officials communicated with the public, creating a new culture of openness and accessibility. Maya had once struggled with doubts about whether she could ever break through the barriers set up by the tech world and the government. Now those doubts were long gone. Her company was on the cusp of something historic. She had proved that a tech startup, led by a Black woman, could challenge the status quo and create tangible change. More importantly, she had inspired a wave of other innovators to believe that they, too, could build businesses that made a difference, not just for profit, but for the public good. Judge Jenkins, who had become a close friend and advisor to Maya, watched with pride as ClearPath evolved into a nationwide tool. He had played a crucial role in shifting public opinion about the importance of transparency, but Maya was the one who had kept pushing forward. Together, they had created a partnership that neither of them could have predicted, and their collaboration had far surpassed anything they could have imagined when they first met in that courtroom. One afternoon, Maya sat in her office, looking over the most recent government adoption reports. She received a call from Judge Jenkins, who was excited about a recent development. "Maya, it's official," he said. "The federal government has signed on. They're going to implement ClearPath across several key departments. This is huge." Maya couldn't help but smile. This was the moment she had worked toward for so long. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "This is going to change everything." Judge Jenkins, as always, was there to remind her of how far they had come. "You did this, Maya. It's your hard work, your dedication. We just helped you get the right people to see it." The phone call ended, but Maya remained sitting, staring out the window at the city below. She thought about her journey, the struggles, the obstacles, the people who had doubted her, and the people who had believed in her. She thought about the fine, a seemingly small and insignificant moment that had led to this extraordinary chapter in her life. Without it, she never would have met Judge Jenkins, never would have had the chance to prove that a small startup could have a monumental impact. Her work was far from done, but Maya felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had helped lay the foundation for a future where citizens could hold their governments accountable and where transparency wasn't a lofty ideal, but a reality. Looking ahead, Maya knew the work of ClearPath was just beginning, but the vision she had fought for was finally realized, and it had only just started to make waves.